Hello YouTube, it's Avi from Avi's Garage, and today I'm going to make a video about something that I haven't seen on the internet, and that's why I'm going to help you out. So in 3 Subaru, I've already taken part of the dash out because I'm going to be mounting my scanner radio just below the stereo, and above you can see my already mounted ham radio. It's a Kenwood that I mounted a while ago, but we're going to do a DIN mount for an SDS200. All right, so with the SDS, once I DIN mount it, I don't want to have to unmount it to connect anything to the back. So here I am and if you look at the back of the radio, it has a bunch of jacks. So the jacks I think that I'll need to access, well, now and then maybe later, are the antenna jack, because this is connected to the antenna on the roof, the external speaker. I don't think I'm going to connect to the micro USB because there's another one on the front. And then I don't have the GPS right now, but when I buy a compatible one, I want to be able to connect it to that. So I think that's an RJ11, and I'll have a pigtail connected to that so I can access it without pulling out the radio. And then there's power here and power here. I'm going to use this power jack because it has, this is just straight power. This one has power and auxiliary power, so it knows when the car's on. So that's what I'm going to connect to. Sorry about my voice. I lost my voice last night. Anyway, let's get to it. All right, the first thing we need to do is find some cables here. As you can see, I got them roughly organized, and I'm looking for some RJ11s because that will allow me to make a little pigtail, and yeah, I think it's probably in that. All right, so I've got some older RJ11 cables. One thing that's important is you can see in here that there's all 4 pins. I don't know if they're all used, but I want to definitely find an RJ11 that has all 4 pins. Some just have the 2 middle ones for a single phone line, but we want to make sure it has all 4 for hooking up a GPS later. So on the back of the radio, I've connected a antenna jack, external speaker, and the GPS. I haven't connected the power yet. I just wanted to make sure I had them all together and I didn't drop them, but we're going to disconnect those in a second while we install it. For the external speaker, I've got this little, I don't know, it used to probably be a Radio Shack speaker, maybe a Motorola. Anyway, I have no idea where it's going to mount, but I've got plenty of wire to mount it. For the GPS jack, I'm just going to use this long RJ11 cable, and I'll just zip tie it up and put it back behind the dash somewhere where I can grab it when I buy a GPS. And then for the antenna jack, I want to make it accessible, so I have a little pigtail with a female UHF connector, which I will probably have poking out somewhere on that side of the dash so I can connect it to one of the antennas on the roof. As for my car, this is a 2003 Subaru. I took the center dash out, and it has this like kind of universal DIN mount. Unfortunately, this radio, I believe, is 1.5 DIN, so it's going to be 1 full car stereo plus half of another. I have no idea how I'm going to block or make into a little cubby that bottom piece. I might have to build something, but I'll deal with that when I get to it. All right, what most people don't realize about the Uniden SDS is that it actually is a DIN mountable radio, but it has this black case over the outside. The way you get to the secret sort of DIN mounts inside is to remove these 4 screws here. So you guys know how to remove screws. I'm going to take those out, slide the radio out of this black case, and show you what it looks like on the inside. For power, I've gone ahead and pulled the screws off the side of the stereo, pulled it back. I'm glad I did, because the antenna on the back wasn't fully seated, which is probably why I get terrible reception. So I fully seated that. Anyway, I'm going to tap the power off of the factory connector. That way it uses the same power as the car stereo. Scanners are pretty low power devices, unlike a transmitter, so I don't need to worry about overloading the circuit. I might need to worry about maybe some RFI coming off some other components, like the fans or something like that, but I think that's probably the cleanest way to wire this in and get both power and ACC when the keys in the right position. So I'm going to do some janky wiring and get this all put together. All right, I'm back in the at the bench here, and I'm going to get the scanner wired in. So it comes with this wiring harness. It has 3 wires on it. Black is ground, red is power, and the orange one is for illumination. And what this does is if you turn the car's headlights on, I believe it dims the radio, or dims the scanner. This is the car stereo, and luckily the car stereo comes with this wiring diagram on the top of it. So I disconnected the harness from the car, and I'm going to tap into this harness. I've already cut the ground here. Whoever did the wiring on this, they did a pretty good job. They crimped them all together. I'm going to go ahead and solder these connections just because it's going to be 2 wires into one. Then I'll cover them with some heat shrink. But whoever did this, not too bad. And so let me get this wired in and I'll show you the result. All right, so we're back in the car. Before we get anything hooked up here, I'm just testing the power and test the car stereo first. That way if I screwed anything up, I only have to buy a crappy car stereo. And then I'm going to connect the scanner, which is down there, and make sure that works. And if everything works, we're going to figure out how to button this up. All right, actually, before I get this buttoned up, I want to talk about a somewhat controversial topic, which is cable management. You're going to notice that I don't use zip ties on these longer wires behind the stereo, behind the scanner. And I do that on purpose. That way I've got a bit of a tail if I want to pull them out without having to completely disable or disassemble everything. Yeah, it's ugly. Does anyone see it? No. It's all stuck behind the dashboard, and if you have to do work later, you'll thank yourself for not having to crawl back there and cut a zip tie. So I clean it up a little bit, like on this really long cable, I threw a zip tie on there. But for the most part, I just shove it all back there and screw everything together, making sure none of the wires get into things like air conditioning controls and stuff like that. All right, slight change of plan. I wanted to put the scanner up here and the radio here, but I just could not get the holes to line up, and quite frankly, I didn't really want to spend time drilling these. So anyway, put the stereo on top, radio on the bottom, it'll be fine. Now, just to figure out how to deal with this gap. It's a half DIN gap, so my full DIN little cubby doesn't fit there. So my thought is to cut this in half so it slides in there, and then just kind of use the bottom of the radio as the top of the cubby. So I'm going to take that into the garage and see if I can somehow trim this down to fit in there. We'll see how that works. Anyway, I cut right above the screw holes there, and I scored it with a razor blade, cut it with a hacksaw. It's pretty easy. So right now I'm just going to kind of clean up the edges of this and see if it fits. Oh wow, I cannot believe that worked as well as it did. So now I have the little cubby. The cubby has little like plastic, I don't know if you can see it, these little nubs that I left on, and as you slide it in, it pops into the various holes until it's lined up. So this looks pretty lined up, and I think when I get all the trim back on, I'll still have a little pocket. All right, one word of advice to everyone. Before you get everything screwed back in, make sure you didn't install anything upside down, and double check that everything behind it is connected. So I just put 2 screws in, but I'm going to power it up right now. I put one in on this side, one in on this side, and just double check that everything works before I put all the trim back on. We've all done it. Don't do it. Well, this is just a hair narrower than the stereos with the radio, and I marked where it's rubbing. And so I'm going to very carefully take some of that lip out and see if I can get it to seat. I'm going to do this probably with a Dremel, but we'll see how it goes. Probably not going to be a problem in most other vehicles, but Subaru just has really tight tolerances, and Uniden decided to make this just slightly bigger than a car stereo. The only thing that's really bugging me is that the stereo here has a little gap now where you can see, well, you can't really see it, the metal plate behind it if you look at an angle. But quite frankly, I think it looks pretty good. And everything's flush. Everything turns on when you turn the key, just like the car stereo. And as luck would have it, both speakers fit in this little hole down here. So I can still access this drawer to get my change or ashtray or whatever that is. And can still access the cigarette lighter adapter. But that's it. That's how you install a Uniden SDS200 in a 2003 Subaru Outback. Savi's Garage. See you later.